Hi, I'm Rebecca Kemp Brent. Maps are a big important thing to me when I travel because I could get lost in a teacup. But I also think that they're really pretty and sort of artistic, so I thought it would be fun to find a way that I could use the maps that I brought home from my travels and not just tuck them away on a shelf. What I have to show you today is this tote bag that I've made from an actual map of the New York subway system. And I've embellished it just a bit with some little symbols like a star over my favorite place in New York. And then I've used my own handwriting to show that to put a title on my bag. So it's kind of fun to translate your handwriting into stitches. And I'll give you a few tips about how to do that as well. The first thing that we need to do, of course, is gather our materials, and I am using fabric on the inside of the tote bag as a lining. You can see that I found a really great coordinating print. If that worries you, then just pick a solid fabric or something that has the same look on both the front and the back sides. And you'll need a little bit of webbing for the handles. All the details about the sizes and the pieces that you need, of course, will be on our website in a format so you can access those again later. And then we come to the most important part of the project, which is the map, and this sort of secret ingredient that I use, which is just a clear self-adhesive plastic. Maps are pretty easy to come by. You can find them often at no charge and visitor centers or highway rest stops, so it's something you might think of collecting as you go on a trip, and then you have plenty of raw materials to work with later. Okay, let me move that out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. To start with, we want to use the plastic to protect the paper map and also make it more durable. This is a low-tack adhesive, which means it's not terribly sticky, and because of that, it doesn't create a problem with gumming up the machine needles or causing thread breaks. To begin, I cut a piece of the plastic that's about the length of my map. It's 18 inches wide, which turns out to be a perfect width for making tote bags, and I've started peeling away the paper backing. I'm going to put that on my map right there at the edge and press it down. Now, I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you'll probably find this easier to do the opposite of what I'm doing. Then with my offhand, I'm going to reach underneath and I grab just the paper backing, and as I pull that paper, I can expose just a couple of inches of the plastic at a time and then smooth that into place on my map. If you get a little bit of a crease or an air bubble, the adhesive is low enough tack that you can lift that up and go back to smooth it out again so that you wind up with a nice flat, perfectly covered surface. And once you've done that, your map is going to be a lot more durable so that you can actually make something functional from it. If you find that your map has torn a little bit in these areas where it's creased, don't worry about that because the plastic will also put those back together again. It's like putting a Band-Aid on it and it will hold it for you. Now, with the subway map in particular, or really with any map, it's like a one-way print, so it has a definite up and down direction. So instead of using my map as a whole piece of fabric, I have decided to take the map and cut it into pieces. This is a little bit of the extra that was at the end of the map, and I've cut a rectangle of that I'll use as the bottom. And then from the map itself, I've cut two larger rectangles. And here's the reason why. I want the top of my map to be right reading on both sides, which means the left edge here, but also the left edge there need to be at the top. So if you'll do that when you cut your pieces, then you'll find that you have a more attractive tote bag in the end. Now we start assembling these, and the first part of the assembly process is going to be that I take another little piece of my plastic. This one is just 6 inches wide, and this time I'm going to go ahead and take the paper completely off and put this on my work surface with the sticky side up. Then I take the base, put it sort of right in the middle, right side up, and I take my two pieces of the map, the two big body rectangles, and I want to arrange those so that the smaller piece is centered between them. And be sure that you have the bottom edge of each of your body rectangles butted up against the base. Now, if I were doing this for real, I would check to be sure I have everything exactly lined up. And if you've made tote bags before, you may recognize this sort of rectangle cutout. I'm going to use that at the end of the process to make boxed corners on the bottom of my tote so it has a nice flat base. My next step is to go to my sewing machine and zigzag over the butted seam where I've joined these pieces. And instead of using just a regular zigzag stitch, if you have one called a 3-step zigzag that actually makes 3 little stitches for each leg of the zigzag, that's the best one to use. You just sew right through the layers of plastic and paper, and that joins all of these together quite solidly. Now, the next step would be that I back this with my lining fabric and take it to my quilting frame and machine where I can do the stitching on it. But before we do that, let me just take a minute to show you quickly a couple of tips for turning your handwriting into a stitched pattern with your software. The easiest and most convenient way to do this is to use a stylus, and that will probably come with your tablet computer. Then you can use it just like a pencil and write directly on the screen. And using USB connectivity, I can write on the screen and then take it to my laptop for more editing, or I can do all of the editing right there on my tablet. And the main reason that I'm switching back and forth today is because you'll be able to see what I'm doing a little bit better if I do this editing on my computer. So switch over with me and we'll take a look at the computer screen, and you can see that I've already written in New York City, and I've transferred that to the pattern creator part of my software. You can zoom in and zoom out as much as you need to work on this and edit. And if you'll look at the lettering, you can see, especially right here, this is a good example, that there's a lot of jitter in my drawing. And that's because there's so many pixels as you trace along. Even if you're using a very smooth hand movement, you're probably going to have a little jitter. There also are places where I have a break in my line. You can see this didn't connect properly. So what I'm going to do to edit this is, first of all, make sure that Edit is selected. And then I'm going over to the toolbar on the left and click on Nodes. Now this populates all these little circles. Each one of these is a point that I can grab and move around to use for editing my design. To grab it, I just draw a little rectangle to select the nodes that I'm interested in. And now there's a great little tool over here called Snap Selected, and when I click that, you can see that I immediately get a line to connect those 2 points, and now they're all part of the same line of stitching. When it comes to this area with jitter, let's select a whole bunch of our points at one time, and then over here on the right, I'm going to select the icon that says Smooth. And you'll notice how the points jump, and now you can see that I have a much smoother curve in my C, and that's going to make it stitch out like something even prettier than my actual handwriting. Okay, now I'm at a point where I want to go to the Optimize screen, and that's located here at the top. And this is going to give me a slightly different view. As you look at this, the green dots are the beginning point for each area of stitching, and the red dots are the end, and the blue dots, which have lines around them, are trims. In other words, that's a place where the software would have the machine stop and tie off, and then move to the next beginning point and stop and tie off again. It takes a little bit longer. So what I want to do is take my handwriting and edit it so that I have a nice continuous design without the stops and starts. To do that, I just hover over New. It turns yellow, and when I click, watch what happens to the red and green points. And now you can see my trim is shorter and it goes directly down to the Y. One of the things that I thought of as I was first working on this is, you know, the machine really doesn't care whether it's writing from left to right the way we normally do, or whether it's working from right to left. So it may seem odd that now we're starting at the end of a word, but that's actually going to make the design flow better. Let's do the same thing to the third section, which is where it says City. And now we have just these 2 short jumps, or trims, and I'm going to click on the icon that says remove all, and what that will do, we don't want to connect the first and last points. That turns our jumps into lines of stitching. So now you can see I have just a number 1. That means this is going to stitch out as one complete continuous design. But of course, I'm not entirely happy with how straight and boxy looking our new stitch lines are. So what I'm going to do is, once again, we'll turn the nodes on so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to select the node right here in the middle of my new line, and you can move that. It's still too boxy, so I'm going to the right and use the icon that says Insert, and you'll notice every time I do that, it creates new editing points for me. And the more editing points you add to your curve, the more you'll be able to smooth out those curves. When you get all the editing points that you want in your design, then you come back to the smooth icon again and look at the difference. Instead of having a straight line, you can see how we're starting to have a nice swooping curve, which is more what we want. Now, to save time, I've gone through and done a little more editing on the design to get it just the way I want it, and then put it on a USB stick that I can take to the tablet that I already have attached to my machine. If you'll come with me over to the machine in the frame, let me show you how we call up the new pattern that we've designed and how we stitch it out on our map. Okay, I already have the design here in my tablet, and I'm going to use the Select and Sew function, which is the simplest way of putting a design on the fabric. Then we choose the pattern that we want, which I have in a folder of designs that I've created for myself. And when we touch Open, it has to think about it just for a moment, and now it's put the design on the screen. It's put it way over in the corner, but that's not a problem. I don't have to worry about that for now. I'm going to use the icon here in the lower right for placement and decide which placement method I want to use. Since I'm just putting this on a map, I'm not filling a quilt block with it, then I'm going to use a placement method that lets me select one point that's easy to find on my map, and with that one point, I will be able to place the design. So I have 1 point block corner chosen. You can see you can also use a center point. They're different options, but this one works well for what I want to do. Then I go to the height and width adjustment. You'll see the little lock next to it, and as long as that lock is engaged, when I change either the height or the width, they'll both change to keep the design in proportion. And then last of all, I want to check Enforce, and what that's going to do is stitch out my design exactly the size I told it to. Then we touch OK, and we're ready to position the design. So I want to put it in this area of the map. I tell the computer exactly where that is, and then I'm ready to go. We'll just pull up the bobbin. Okay, and this is going to start tying off now and stitching. The reason I like to do this on my frame, it gives me such a big area that I can stitch in. I can also design tiny little symbols like arrows and stars that I want to put on my map. And when the machine's all finished, I have a personalized map that works like a piece of fabric, and I can use it for a tote bag or any other project. It's always a nice way to make a new memory.